How destructive are they?
They're very destructive. If I looked at it on average, I could lose up to 10% of my grain crops in a growing season.
Wild boars cause over $1.5 billion in damages every single year, wrecking ecosystems and bankrupting family farms. Traditional control methods like hunting and wire fencing have barely made a dent in their exploding population numbers. But recently, a new defense strategy has emerged that is practically 100% effective and is surprisingly low-tech. It forces the animals to give up without a fight. Yet, as effective as this is, it has forced the boars to adapt in a way that is keeping farmers awake at night. How a simple ditch defeated high-tech security. Wild boars are currently causing an estimated $1.5 billion in damage every single year to crops, livestock, and fragile environments across the United States. These are not your average barnyard animals gone astray. They are invasive ecological wrecking balls that farmers are desperate to control. In Texas alone, the agricultural sector loses approximately $119 million annually just from feral hog damage. For years, the industry threw money at the problem, investing in high-voltage electric fences and reinforced steel mesh. But here is the catch. The pigs kept getting through. It turns out that wild boars are incredibly intelligent problem solvers. If they encounter a fence, they test it. If they get shocked, they look for a weak point. If they cannot go through it, they go under debt. Farmers realized that relying on technology that requires power sources and constant maintenance was a losing battle. A single storm could knock out the electricity, or a single gap in the wire could let a whole sounder inside. So, they stopped looking forward for solutions and started looking backward. They began digging. The new method is actually an ancient one, the trench. By digging a ditch that is roughly 1 to 1.5 meters deep and similarly wide around the perimeter of a field, farmers create a barrier that uses the pig's own anatomy against it. Is not that simple, though. Is not just a hole in the ground. Is a geometric trap. Wild boars are built like tanks, low to the ground and dense. They are not designed for vertical leaping like deer are. When a boar encounters a steep, deep trench, its visual perception struggles to process the depth, and its physical build prevents it from jumping across the gap without a running start, which the terrain often does not allow. In Brazil, where the problem is just as severe as it is in Texas, this method has saved entire plantations of corn and soy. Farmers there reported that herds of over 200 animals were sweeping through fields like locusts, destroying everything in a single night. But once the trenches were dug, the incursion stopped almost instantly. The beauty of the trench is that it does not short-circuit. It does not run out of batteries. It does not need a software update. It just sits there, a permanent line in the sand that the animals cannot cross. However, the sheer scale of these operations is mind-blowing. We are talking about moving thousands of tons of earth. The upfront cost of fuel and heavy machinery is massive in Malum. But when you compare it to losing $250,000 in crops every season, the math starts to make sense. Is a brutal physical solution to a problem that technology failed to solve. But while the trench stops them from entering, it does not solve the problem of the pigs that are already there. And that is where things get complicated. Because while you can block a pig with a ditch, you cannot outsmart a hungry animal forever. They adapt, they learn, and when they realize they cannot get to the crops, they start looking for other food sources, often moving closer to homes and barns. The trench wins the battle for the field, but it pushes the war right to the farmer's doorstep. And get this, once the pigs realize the game has changed, they change their tactics too. The trench was only the first move in a much darker chess game, high-tech gates, and the art of patience. So here's the deal. If you cannot block them all, you have to remove them. But catching a wild boar is not like catching a mouse. These animals are widely considered to be among the most intelligent creatures in North America, often ranked alongside dogs and chimpanzees in terms of cognitive ability. If you set a trap and catch 3 pigs out of a group of 20, you have not solved the problem. You have actually made it worse. You have just educated the other 17. They will never go near that trap again. This is why farmers have developed a method called whole sounder removal. The goal is 0 survivors. To do this, they have to engage in psychological warfare. It starts with the bait. You cannot just throw some corn on the ground and hope for the best. Farmers create a specific concoction, often called sour mash. They take dry corn and mix it with water, yeast, and massive amounts of sugar, often using strawberry or grape gelatin powder. They let this mixture sit in the sun for days until it ferments. The result is a pungent alcohol-scented sludge that smells absolutely terrible to humans but is irresistible to hogs. The fermentation amplifies the scent, allowing it to drift for miles on the wind, pulling pigs in from deep cover. But the crazy part is what happens next. Farmers will bait a site for weeks without ever setting a trap. They let the pigs come, eat, and leave safely. Night after night, they watch them on cellular trail cameras, counting every single snout. They learn the hierarchy. Who is the matriarch? Which ones are the cautious scouts? They wait until every single member of the group is comfortable. Only then do they erect the trap walls, but they leave the door wide open. They condition the animals to walk inside the metal enclosure as if it were a dining hall. This requires a level of patience that is agonizing. You see the pigs on the camera destroying the bait, and you want to trigger the gate, but if you do it too early, you fail. This is where the technology kicks in. Modern traps like the Boar Buster utilize a drop-down corral system that is suspended in the air. It does not rely on a tripwire which can be triggered by a raccoon or a single pig. Instead, it uses a live video feed connected to the farmer's smartphone. The farmer can be sitting in his living room 10 m away watching the live stream. He waits. He watches the juveniles enter, then the sub-adults. Finally, the massive cautious matriarch steps in. Once the entire group is inside the circle, he hits a button on his phone. In less than a second, the trap drops from the sky, sealing them all in. There is no escape. And more importantly, there are no survivors to run away and teach the other groups that traps are dangerous. It is a brutal efficiency. But even this high-tech system has a flaw. There are always those few pigs, the trap-shy ones that sense something is wrong. They stand at the edge of a light, refusing to enter. They watch their family eat, but they never cross the line. These are the ones that haunt farmers. They are the survivors, the ones with the best genes for caution. And if they are left alive, they will breed a new generation of super cautious pigs. They're almost impossible to catch. Dealing with these masterminds requires shifting the battlefield entirely. When the traps fail, the farmers must turn off the lights, turning the night into a hunting ground. What most people don't realize is that wild boars are not naturally nocturnal creatures. In the wild, undisturbed, they would be active during the day, but decades of hunting pressure and human activity have forced them to shift their biological clocks. They have become creatures of the night to avoid us. So, farmers had to own the night, too. This is where the technology shifts from agricultural to tactical. We are talking about military-grade thermal imaging. This is not the green and grainy night vision you see in old movies, which relies on amplifying existing light. If it is a pitch-black night with no moon, night vision is useless. Thermal imaging is different. It detects heat signatures. A wild boar glows like a neon sign against the cool soil of a cornfield. It does not matter if there is fog, smoke, or total darkness. They cannot hide their body heat. Farmers and professional hunters are now equipping AR platform rifles with thermal scopes like the Pulsar Trail or the THR-4. These devices cost thousands of dollars, but they offer an unfair advantage. A hunter can spot a sounder of hogs from over 400 yards away. The pigs have no idea they are being watched. The hunters use suppressors to mask the sound of the shots, preventing the animals from scattering instantly. The caliber of choice is often the 6.8 SP. It hits harder than the standard military 5.56 round, delivering enough kinetic energy to neutralize a 300-pound boar instantly, but with low enough recoil to allow for rapid follow-up shots. Because remember, the goal is not to take one trophy animal. The goal is to wipe out the group. Speed is everything. The biology of the boar also plays a huge role here. Hogs do not have functioning sweat glands. They cannot cool themselves down effectively. In the summer heat of Texas or Florida, they are miserable during the day. They bed down in deep, thick brush where no human can reach them. They only move when the sun goes down and the air cools. This makes the night the only viable time to engage them. Interestingly, the moon phases dictate the strategy. Hunters have noticed that on nights with a full moon, the pigs are actually less active. They are smart enough to know that the bright moonlight makes them visible. They prefer the darkest nights of the month. But with thermal scopes, the darkness is no longer a shield. Is a trap. This shift to night operations has changed the culture of farming in these areas. Is a 24-hour job now. You farm the land by day, and you defend it by night. But even with thermal scopes and suppressors, the pigs are adapting again. They are learning to recognize the sound of a truck engine miles away. They are learning to avoid open fields entirely, and this constant pressure pushes them to move. They migrate. They cross property lines. And this brings us to the biggest challenge of all. You can have the best trenches, the best traps, and the best thermal scopes, but if your neighbor is not doing the same thing, you are fighting a losing battle. The boar's greatest defense is not its tusks. It's the property line. Adapting tactics to the boar's biological clock is not that simple, though. You cannot just use one method all year round. The strategy has to change as the seasons change because the pig's motivation changes. Farmers have learned to play a seasonal chess game. The winter months from late December to March are the golden window for trapping. Why? It comes down to calories. In the winter, the natural food sources in the forest are gone. The acorns have been eaten. The roots are frozen or hard to dig. The animals are cold, which means their bodies are burning calories at a frantic rate just to stay warm. They are desperate. When a pig is desperate, it makes mistakes. It takes risks. This is when the sour mash bait works best. Farmers can clear out 70 to 80% of a population in these months because the pigs have no choice but to enter the traps for food. But then spring hits and everything falls apart. The ground thaws. Farmers plant millions of acres of corn and soy seeds. Suddenly, the fields are full of high-protein snacks. The forests come alive with grubs, roots, and greenery. Why would a pig risk walking into a metal cage for some old fermented corn when there is a buffet of fresh food everywhere? Trapping success rates plummet in the spring. This is when farmers switch to damage control mode. They know they cannot catch them all, so they switch to the thermal night hunting to protect the seedlings. They are not trying to wipe them out. They are trying to scare them off the fields long enough for the crops to establish roots. Summer brings a new weakness, water. As mentioned, pigs cannot sweat. In the blistering heat of July and August, water is more valuable than food. They have to visit wallows and creeks every day to regulate their body temperature. Farmers exploit this ruthlessly. They set their cameras and traps near water sources. They do not bait with food. They bait with access to mud. It is a biological necessity that the pigs cannot ignore. Then comes the chaos of fall. The crops are harvested, removing the cover. The forests drop tons of massed acorns and hickory nuts. Food is everywhere again. But this is also when deer hunting season starts. Thousands of hunters enter the woods, disturbing the herds. This pressure causes the balloon effect. If you squeeze the population in the forest, they pop out onto the farmland. Groups of hogs can migrate up to 19m in a few days. A farmer might think he has cleared his land only to wake up one morning and find 3 new sounders have moved in from a neighboring county. This migration capability is what makes them a super species. They are nomadic opportunists. They do not respect fences, and they certainly do not respect the hard work of the farmers. This constant movement means that a farmer can do everything right and still lose. This realization led to the most important discovery in modern pest control. It is not about the gun, the trap, or the trench. It is about the handshake. A solitary farmer is just a buffet provider breaking the chain of reinfestation. Here is the hard truth that no equipment salesman wants to tell you. You can buy the most expensive thermal scope on market. You can dig a trench that looks like it belongs on a World War I battlefield. You can mix the most potent sour mash bait that money can buy. But if you are doing this alone, you are basically setting fire to your bank account. Wild boar control is not a solo mission. It is a team sport, and if your team isn't playing, you have already lost the game before the first whistle blow. Imagine this scenario. You spend $10,000 fortifying your 300 acres. You have traps, cameras, and reinforced fencing. You patrol every night, but right next door there is a neighbor who owns 500 acres of dense brush, and he never visits the property. He doesn't hunt, he doesn't trap, and he doesn't care. To a wild pig, your neighbor's land is a 5-star hotel, is a sanctuary. They sleep there all day, deep in the thicket, safe from your thermal sights. They breed there. They raise their young there. Then, as soon as the sun goes down, they cross the property line, raid your crops, tear up your pasture, and retreat back to safety before you can even load your truck. Ecologists call this the source instinct dynamic and is the #1 reason why eradication programs fail. The neglected property is the source. It pumps out new pigs endlessly. Your well-managed farm is the sink. You are just draining the overflow, but you are never stopping the leak. No matter how many you remove, the source just refills your land with fresh pests within weeks. Experts finally realized that looking at a map property by property was a mistake. To actually beat this enemy, you have to stop thinking like a farmer and start thinking like a general. This is called landscape scale management. This strategy treats an entire county, or even an entire state, as one single farm. It erases the imaginary lines of property fences and looks at the terrain the way the pigs do. In states like Kansas and parts of Illinois, this approach has led to massive successes that shock the agricultural world. They stopped trying to fight individual skirmishes and started a total war. They formed task forces that cover hundreds of square miles. This is total community mobilization. They established real-time communication networks. If a farmer on the east side of the county sees a sounder, a herd of pigs moving west, he doesn't just watch them leave. He gets on a secure text chain and alerts the neighbor to the west. They are heading your way. They coordinate trap drops so that they hit multiple herds on the same night, preventing the animals from learning that the traps are dangerous. They even share the massive cost of helicopter rentals for aerial operations. Instead of one guy paying thousands for an hour of flight time, 20 farmers split the bill and the helicopter sweeps the entire valley in one go. But here is the catch. Getting a group of humans to agree on anything is a nightmare. Getting 50 independent landowners to agree on a complex, expensive tactical operation is almost impossible. The human factor is the biggest gap in the defense line. You always have that one guy. Maybe he likes having a few pigs around because he thinks they are fun to hunt on the weekends. He treats them like game animals, not pests. He refuses to let the task force on his land. Then you have the absentee landowners, people who live in the city and inherited the land but never see it. They don't want to pay for traps. They don't want strangers on their property. These gaps are all the pigs need. Remember, biology are completely on their side. We are fighting against an evolutionary masterpiece. A wild essay can begin breeding when she is just 6 months old. She doesn't just have 1 or 2 babies. She can have 2 litters a year with 6 to 10 piglets per litter. Do the math. It's terrifying. Even if you manage to remove 70% of the pig population in your area of ARM this year, which is a massive undertaking, that remaining 30% can reproduce fast enough to return the population to its original level within 12 months. This is why the 95% rule exists. Management doesn't work. Containment doesn't work. To actually solve the problem long-term, you need to remove nearly every single animal. You have to eradicate the local population entirely. And you cannot do that if they have a safe harbor next door. The coordination issues go way beyond just stubborn neighbors. It involves state laws and a dark history of human interference. This is where things get infuriating. Believe it or not, the explosion of the wild pig population wasn't entirely natural. It was assisted. For decades, people, often creating illegal hunting preserves, would catch wild pigs in one state, load them into trailers, and truck them hundreds of miles to release them in a new area. They wanted to create a new population for sport hunting. It was an artificial spread. This is why you suddenly see populations popping up in areas that make no geographical sense. Is the Trojan pig theory. We basically delivered the enemy inside our own gates. Now, moving a live feral hog is a serious crime in many places. Transportation bans are crucial, but the damage is already done. The genie is out of the bottle, and we are trying to catch it with a butterfly net. Wild Theory 1, the hive mind adaptation. So, the brilliant trick isn't just the trench, the sour mash, or the thermoscope. The brilliant trick is the realization that humans have to be as organized as the sounder. The pigs survive because they stick together. Farmers are finally learning to do the same. But as we push these animals to the brink, we have to ask the scary questions. What happens when the most adaptable animal on the planet runs out of options? There is a theory circulating among fringe researchers that suggests we are accidentally forcing the pigs to evolve at a rapid pace. It's called pressure-induced intelligence. By using such high-tech methods, thermal drones, cell-connected traps, aerial gunning, we are wiping out the dumb ones. The only pigs surviving today are the ones that are smart enough to recognize the sound of a drone rotor before it gets close. They are the ones that can smell human scent on a trap and has been left out for weeks. We are selectively breeding a super pig that is naturally suspicious of our best technology. Some hunters have reported seeing scout pigs. This is a wild theory, but the accounts are chilling. They claim that a sounder will send a single lone male into a baited area first. The rest of the group waits in the tree and watching. If the scout eats and survives, they move in. If the trap triggers, only the SD scout is lost, and the rest of the group learns exactly what that trap looks like. They never make that mistake again. Are they developing a military-style hierarchy to counter ours? Wild Theory 2, the urban infiltration. Here is another possibility that experts are quietly whispering about in closed circles. It brings up a terrifying question. Where do these survivors go when we lock down the farms? We usually assume that if we cut off their food source in the wild, they will just starve or die off. But history has shown us time and time again that this species does not just give up. It relocates. It adapts. And right now, there is a growing fear that as rural pressure becomes too intense, as the helicopters and traps close in, wild boars will make the urban shift. We aren't just guessing here. We have already seen this happen in major global cities. In Berlin, they roam the parks. In Barcelona, they walk the streets at night. But imagine that happening in the massive sprawling suburbs of the United States. We are talking about an animal that is the ultimate opportunist. They can eat literally anything. Your garbage cans, that's a buffet. The pet food you left on the porch, that's an appetizer. Roadkill, a free meal. But the scariest part isn't what they eat, it's how they travel. The theory suggests that they will start, or perhaps already have started, using our own infrastructure against us. Think about it. These underground tunnels act as superhighways beneath our feet. They connect entire cities. They are dark. They are temperature controlled, staying cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And most importantly, they are completely free of humans. If boars learn to navigate the stormwater infrastructure, the game changes overnight. They could live underneath a major city like Houston or Atlanta during the day, sleeping in the concrete darkness, and then surface in parks, golf courses, and backyards at night. This creates a tactical nightmare. In the woods, you can use aggressive measures, but you cannot fly a helicopter gunship over a quiet suburb. You cannot fire a high-caliber rifle in a neighborhood cul-de-sac. If they make this jump to the cities, they become effectively untouchable. The landscape scale management strategy falls apart completely because the landscape is now full of people, cars, and concrete. They would be using our own homes as a shield. Wild Theory 3, the genetic time bomb. But if the idea of pigs under the sidewalk scares you, the wildest theory involves the DNA itself. We have to remember what we are dealing with. These aren't normal farm pigs. They are hybrids. A Frankenstein mix of domestic pigs and the Grand Eurasian wild boar. This genetic cocktail is unstable, unpredictable, and highly dangerous. Some geneticists are worried that we are seeing the sudden emergence of dormant traits. There are reports of something called Borman's rule kicking in at an accelerated rate. In biology, this rule states that animals within a species will get physically larger in colder climates to conserve heat. As these pigs push north into Canada, creating the dreaded super pig we keep hearing about on the news. They aren't just surviving the cold, they are using it to evolve. The theory suggests that the extreme stress of the freezing temperatures combined with the intense hunting pressure is unlocking a gigantism gene. We might not just be dealing with more pigs in the near future. We might be dealing with physically larger, thicker skin monsters. We are talking about boars that weigh as much as a small piano with gristle shields on their shoulders. So thick that the small caliber rounds simply bounce off them. They are becoming tanks, and their behavior is evolving just as fast as their bodies. We are now seeing boars building pigloos. This is not a joke. They are digging deep tunnels into the snow and lining the floors with cattails they have cut down with their tusks. The cattails provide insulation, trapping the body heat of the sounder. The herd steam has been seen rising from these mounds in the dead of winter. You have to understand the implication here. This isn't just animal instinct. This is tool use. This is architecture. They are engineering their own shelters to survive sub-zero temperatures that should have frozen them solid. If they can engineer a warm home in the middle of a Canadian blizzard, what else can they engineer? What else are they capable of learning? We might be watching a species evolve into a superior conqueror in real time. So, are we actually winning the war against these super pests? Or are we just breeding a smarter, more elusive super pig that will be even harder to stop? It makes you wonder if nature always finds a way to beat our technology. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit like and subscribe.